It's really good fun. Hot, but fun. No, it's learning about the culture, isn't it? Different country. People back in England, charities in England, to sort of recognise Lesotho as, a country that needs help.
A board of trustees received a request, read it, and then did exactly what UK charity law required them to do, and said no. The response to that refusal is now registered in the High Court of England and Wales. Filed 24th March 2026. Defamation, libel, slander. The charity serving 78,000 HIV-positive children across Lesotho and Botswana is now in litigation with its own co-founder. That co-founder built this institution with his own hands, named it after the word his mother left behind in that country, forget-me-not. Most coverage of this story is running it as a Sussex brand failure. Another chapter in the collapse narrative, the income down, the partners gone, the name that once meant something now trailing a lawsuit through the London courts. That framing skips the specific document the board refused to hand over. It skips what that document would have been used for and the question that actually matters here, which is not whether Harry's brand is in trouble, but whether a man who built an institution on his mother's humanitarian legacy could still tell the difference between that legacy and his content operation. This is not a story about a prince falling out with his own charity. It is a story about a violated code and the board that enforced it. Harry co-founded Sentebale in 2006. The name means forget-me-not in Sesotho. At the concert for Diana in July 2007, he said it was chosen as a memorial to the charity work of their mothers, his and Prince Sieso's. A tribute, like a promise. The original conviction, before the brand existed. In March 2024, a Netflix camera crew arrived at a Sentebale polo fundraiser in Miami. The venue owner reclassified the event as a commercial undertaking. The charity lost the original venue. In March 2026, Sentebale filed a defamation claim against its co-founder in the High Court of England and Wales. The lawsuit is filed, board is named, and the co-founder is the defendant. What the board found in the request that started all of this is what this video is about. If you are not subscribed, do it now. Because what comes next changes how you read every public statement Harry has made about why he left and what he said he was protecting.
Princess Diana worked tirelessly with Africa's most vulnerable communities and children.
Well, yeah, I'm only trying to highlight a problem that's going on all around the world. That's all.
In 2004, Harry was 19 years old and in Lesotho filming a documentary about AIDS orphans. Not a gap-year photograph or a carefully managed press appearance. 8 weeks at the Manse's children's home, working, producing footage himself, befriending a boy and sharing a pair of Wellington boots. The film raised nearly £2 million for the British Red Cross. He said afterward, "The nicest thing out here is that they don't know who I am." That was the version of him that walked in, before the promise became the brand, before the original conviction had a content deal attached to it. 2 years after that documentary aired, he co-founded Sentebale with Prince Sieso of Lesotho. Named it after the word his mother's work had left behind in that country. The man who filed as a defendant in Sentebale's defamation claim in March 2026 is the same man who stood in that orphanage in 2004. The distance between those two moments is the entire story. In September 2020, Harry signed a multi-year content deal with Netflix. That deal did not change what Harry believed about Sentebale, but it changed the operational logic he brought to every institution around him. Content requires material, and material requires access. But it also requires cooperation from the people and organisations closest to the story being told. By 2023, the charity's impact existed inside two frameworks simultaneously. Inside Sentebale's framework, those stories belong to the people who lived them, sensitive and protected. The legal responsibility of a board of trustees whose fiduciary duty ran to the beneficiaries, not to the founder. Inside the Netflix framework, those same stories were assets. The request to the board arrived in March 2024, not as a demand, but rather as an ask. A camera crew at a polo fundraiser in Miami. The board read what the ask would cost the charity's classification, its venue, its relationship with the people it served. The distance between those two frameworks was where the whole thing cracked open, which is why what the board found in that request has not been fully reported. Most of the coverage treating this as a Sussex brand failure story hasn't asked what the board was actually protecting, and that's the document this video is built on. The people who actually read what charitable boards are legally required to protect consistently find the story behind the lawsuit is more specific and more uncomfortable than the headline. This is not a story about a prince falling out with his own charity. It is a story about what happens when a humanitarian identity becomes a revenue model and the institution built to honor that identity refuses to be absorbed into it. Most of the outlets running the brand collapse angle haven't asked a more specific question, not whether Harry was wrong to want Sentebale's story told more widely, but what precisely the board was asked to make available, and to whom and inside which commercial framework. That question has a documented answer. It sits in the sequence of events that began at a polo field in Miami in April 2024. The camera crew, the venue, the reclassification, the ask that followed. And it explains why the board's refusal was not a surprise to anyone who had read what was being requested. The full picture of that request has not been reported. Not completely. That is where this video is going. Before we get there, a question worth settling now. Did Harry take the Sentebale board to court because he genuinely believed they had failed his mother's work, or because they were the one institution that told him no? Two camps. Drop it in the comments. I'm reading everyone. Because here is what the documented record actually shows. When the fiduciary obligation of a charitable board collides with the commercial requirements of a content operation, one of those two things has to yield. The board's legal duty ran to 78,000 beneficiaries, HIV-positive children and young people across Lesotho and Botswana whose stories were not the board's to give away. In April 2026, the High Court of England and Wales received a defamation claim that tells you exactly which framework Harry believed should have yielded. The filing did that. Not a press statement, not a spokesperson's quote, a court document, and the sequence of events that made it necessary.
Sentebale has filed a defamation lawsuit against Harry. Court records reveal that both Harry and this is also his longtime associate Mark Dyer. They're facing claims of libel and slander. If the case goes to court, Rita, it could be the first time Harry's version of events are officially challenged ever, or he's held accountable for airing his grievances publicly. So I think it's something for us to all, really stay focused on.
And it's a bit of a change of pace for him. He's normally the plaintiff in these lawsuits. So for him to be on the other side.
Lesotho, 2004. One of the smallest, poorest countries on earth, landlocked inside South Africa, with one of the highest HIV infection rates anywhere in the world. Harry spent 8 weeks there. No entourage, no carefully managed itinerary, just him, a film crew from ITN, and the children at the Mansay's orphanage. He worked, he filmed, he sat with children who had lost both parents to AIDS and had no language for what was happening to them. The documentary aired on ITV1 on the 19th of September 2004. The Forgotten Kingdom, Prince Harry in Lesotho. Nearly £2 million raised for the British Red Cross. The footage was real, and the conviction behind it was real before the promise had been tested, before the request had been written. That conviction had a name 2 years later. Sentebale, Forget-Me-Not in Sesotho. Harry and Prince Siso of Lesotho co-founded the charity in April 2006. At the concert for Diana in July 2007, Harry stood up and said it plainly. The name was chosen as a memorial to the charity work of our own mothers. Not a brand statement, not a content hook. A promise made in public, in front of 70,000 people, about what the institution existed to do. In 2020, at a Sentebale fundraising dinner, he said it again. To honour my mother's legacy in supporting those affected by HIV and AIDS. 14 years. The same conviction. The same language. The same work he would later ask the board to make available. March 2024. Harry's team contacted Sentebale, a Netflix camera crew, he said, for the Polo fundraiser in Miami. The ask was framed as exposure, a chance to bring Sentebale's work to a larger audience. The chair, Sophie Chandoka, drafted agreements. Then the venue owner found out about Netflix. The classification changed immediately. No longer a charitable fundraiser, now a commercial undertaking. The rental price went up. Sentebale could not meet it. The charity lost the original venue less than a month before the event. A new venue was found. The Polo went ahead. But something else happened at that event. Something that would make the distance between Harry and the board impossible to close. After the match, Harry's team contacted Chandoka directly. A press incident involving Meghan had generated negative coverage. The ask, a public statement of support from the charity chair. Chandoka refused. Her position was precise. Sentebale could not function as an extension of the Sussex operation. The board had now said no twice. Here is what the board was legally required to protect. Under Lehtimaki versus Cooper, a Supreme Court ruling that governs charitable companies in England and Wales, trustees owe a single-minded fiduciary duty to the charity's purposes. Not to the founder, not to the patron, to the beneficiaries. Releasing the stories of HIV-positive children and young people for a Netflix production would have engaged the no-profit rule. Fiduciaries cannot use information belonging to the charity for external commercial benefit. The board's refusal was not a governance failure. It was the correct institutional answer to the correct legal question.
The mission to help young people with AIDS and HIV in the South African countries of Lesotho and Botswana. 20 years later, that same charity is suing Harry for defamation. Now, in the last few years, there were disagreements with the senior leaders of the charity, notably over the fundraising strategy in the U.S. Harry ultimately left Sentebale in 2025 after a public dispute over how the charity was being managed. But since then, the trustees claim Harry has been behind what they called a coordinated adverse media campaign, which the charity says has triggered an onslaught of cyberbullying directed at the charity and its leadership. Now, we reached out to Prince Harry's team, who told us he categorically rejects the claims, saying in a statement, "It is extraordinary that charitable funds are now being used to pursue legal action against the very people who built and supported the organization for nearly 2 decades."
It is possible Harry believed Sentebale's impact stories would reach more people inside a Netflix documentary than sitting in an annual report. That is a coherent argument. It is also the wrong argument, because the question was never whether the stories were valuable. The question was who the stories belonged to, which is why the board's refusal was not a surprise to anyone who had read what was being requested. 3 facts. No conclusions written here. Harry left the institution to protect his family from being used as content. Fact. His legal team is now a defendant in a suit brought by a charity whose beneficiaries' stories he sought for his content operation. Stop. The Sentebale board operated for nearly 20 years without this dispute reaching a courtroom. Fact. The dispute began at the precise moment the Netflix request arrived. Stop. Harry's founding statement said Sentebale existed because of what his mother believed. Fact. The charity's defamation claim characterizes him as the architect of a coordinated campaign that caused operational disruption and reputational harm to the institution built in her name. I've been watching this institution for years. Here's my read. The Charity Commission investigated. They found mismanagement, weak governance, lack of clear policies. They cleared Harry of bullying. Both sides took damage. That is the official verdict, and it is worth stating clearly. But the Commission's findings are not the story. The story is the sequence. The Netflix request arrives. The board refuses. The patron resignations follow. The regulator investigates. Then a defamation claim lands in the High Court of England and Wales, filed by the charity against its co-founder. Every institution Harry has been in conflict with, he is characterised as broken. The palace, the press. Now a board of trustees protecting HIV-positive children from commercial exposure. At some point, the pattern is the story, not the institution. On the 24th of March 2026, Sentebale filed its claim in the High Court of England and Wales. The grounds: a coordinated adverse media campaign conducted since March 2025, architected by Harry and former trustee Mark Dyer. Operational disruption, reputational harm, an onslaught of cyberbullying directed at charity leadership. The filing seeks court intervention, protection, and restitution. Harry's response was immediate. His spokesperson called the claims offensive and damaging. The use of charitable funds for litigation, extraordinary, they said. Against the very people who built this organisation for nearly 2 decades, the charity confirmed no charitable funds were used. External funding covers the legal costs. So the board that refused to release vulnerable children's stories to a Netflix operation is now a plaintiff in a London courtroom. The co-founder who said he was carrying his mother's flag is the defendant. Was the Netflix request a genuine attempt to amplify Sentebale's work? Or the moment Harry stopped being able to tell the difference between his grief and his brand? Comment below. Before I tell you what the board found in that request, and what it means that Harry has never publicly addressed what his Netflix team specifically asked Sentebale to hand over. One question. Do you think the board was right to refuse? Or did the man who built this charity with his own hands have a legitimate claim on how its story gets told? Comment now. Because the answer changes everything about how you read what comes next. This is the moment to name her. Diana visited Lesotho. She held HIV-positive patients when the world still recoiled from them. She made promises in that country, not from a platform, not for a camera, because she believed the work mattered regardless of who was watching. Harry was 12 when she died. 5 years later, he went to Lesotho and built something in her name. That conviction was real. The grief behind it was real. The documented record of nearly 20 years of impact, 78,000 children served, 4,601 HIV patients tracked and returned to care, is the proof of what that original conviction built. The documented record of March 2026 is also real. In Spare, Harry wrote, "She cuddled AIDS patients. I was carrying her flag." The defamation claim filed against him by the institution built to carry that flag was registered in the High Court of England and Wales 6 weeks ago. What the documented picture actually shows is a man who could not separate the flag from the franchise. The law on this is not ambiguous. Lehtimäki versus Cooper, Supreme Court of the United Kingdom, UKSC 33, confirms that members of a charitable company owe a fiduciary duty of single-minded loyalty to the charity's purposes. Personal interests cannot override that duty. A founder's content operation does not change the calculation. The board's refusal was the legally correct answer. That is not an editorial position. It is what the Supreme Court requires of charitable trustees. What has never been addressed on the record is something different. Harry has not publicly explained what his Netflix request specifically asked Sentebale to provide. He has not addressed why the defamation claim, not a governance dispute, not a mediated resolution, but a High Court defamation claim, was the chosen response to a board doing its legal job. He has not addressed the timing. The silence sits in the record alongside the filing. That detail is confirmed. What it means? That is the narrator's read. Here is my position. Stated once. Harry did not file a defamation claim against Sentebale because he believed the board had failed his mother's work. The documented sequence, Netflix request, board refusal, patron resignation, defamation filing, does not support that reading. A man genuinely concerned about governance has options that do not involve suing the institution he built in his mother's name for telling the truth about what happened to it. The characterization of a fiduciary refusal as a coordinated media campaign is the tell. Not the lawsuit itself, the language chosen to justify it. Nobody put this on record. But the distance between "I was carrying her flag" and Sentebale versus Duke of Sussex is not a distance created by a broken board. It was created by a man who could no longer tell where the flag ended and the franchise began. The bill arrived in public, in a London courtroom, with his name on it as the defendant. Most people watching this story have been watching the wrong one. The brand collapse narrative is real. The income down, the donors gone quiet, the name that once opened every door in philanthropy now landing differently in every room it enters. That story is true, but it is not the story. Here is what actually happened. A man built something in the years before the brand existed. The conviction was real. The original purpose was real. Before the content deals, before the platform, before the version of him the world argued about at dinner tables. Something was built from grief, in a country where his mother's spirit had followed him. And for nearly 2 decades, that thing outlasted every other institution around it. Then a request arrived on a board table in London. The board read it. The cost of what remained, the original conviction, what he said it was for, became visible in a single document. Not to a journalist, not to a palace courtier, to the trustees of the charity he had built with his own hands. What the board found in that request was the distance between the man who walked into Lesotho at 19 and the document filed in a London court in 2026. That distance is what this story was always about. There is a moment, and nobody ever sees it while it is happening, when the thing you love becomes the thing you are selling. It does not arrive as a decision. No room goes quiet. Nobody makes a phone call to mark the crossing. The grief stays real. The conviction stays real. The language you use to describe what you are doing stays exactly the same. Only the architecture underneath it has shifted, and the shift is invisible until something external refuses to move with it. The Sentebale board refused to move with it. That refusal cost them a founder, a patron resignation, a charity commission investigation, a defamation claim in the High Court of England and Wales. 19 years of documented work now sitting inside litigation because a board of trustees did what fiduciary duty required them to do. And the man who built the institution could not accept that the institution had a purpose that was not his to direct. When we turn the thing we love into the thing we're selling, we rarely notice the moment it crosses over. Neither does anyone watching. The bill arrives in public, and by then the distance is already too wide to close in a courtroom. The lawsuit has not concluded. As of April 2026, the High Court of England and Wales has not ruled. Sentebale's defamation claim against the Duke of Sussex remains active. 20 years of documented impact, 78,000 children served, HIV patients tracked and returned to care, a children's centre in Lesotho with a dining hall named after his mother. All of it now inside litigation between the charity and its founder. Buckingham Palace has not commented. Kensington Palace has not commented. The official position is that this is a private matter for the Duke of Sussex. That silence is doing work. Because the question this case will eventually force is not one a judge in London can answer alone. What happens to a charitable legacy built on a mother's humanitarian work when the founder is estranged from it? Legally, institutionally, publicly? Who inherits the connection to that legacy? Who decides what it means going forward? That decision does not belong to a courtroom. It belongs to whoever sits on the throne when the dust settles. What a king does with a charitable inheritance built on a mother the institution destroyed, that is the subject of the next video. One question before you go. Did Harry become a defendant in Sentebale's lawsuit because he genuinely believed the board had betrayed everything his mother's work stood for? or because it was the one institution he built that refused to become part of what he was selling. Tell me where you stand.